Radical strategic reset of housing policy. That's what the Housing Commission has called for in its leaked report, and excerpts of which have been published today. And I think we all look forward to reading it, but it's within government's gift to publish it, and it should be published. And I'm glad you say it will be published this week. But what we know from what has been leaked is that it exposes what it describes as fundamentally systemic failures in housing policy, ineffective decision-making, reactive policy-making, risk aversion, and crucially, a housing deficit of as many as 256,000 homes. Taoiseach, the Commission's report appears to confirm what we have all known for some time. Your government's half measures and ineffective policies are not working. They're not delivering homes for all those people locked out of housing today. And doubling down on those ineffective policies is making matters worse. We're in a housing crisis, a housing disaster, as our President Michael D. Higgins has said. And the Commission has said, again in leaked excerpts, emergency action is needed. But where is the sense of emergency from government? Where is the urgency? The housing crisis is the civil rights issue of this generation. Yet week in, week out, all we hear from government is self-congratulation, saying that your policies and your housing plans are working. And I'm sure this afternoon we'll hear from government ministers and TDs in this chamber just how well they say Housing for All is working. But Taoiseach, that's not the reality. And the Housing Commission has exposed the reality. They're not an opposition party. They're not an ideological body. They're set up by the government. And the members of the Commission, I think you acknowledge that, they comprise figures from the trade union movement, developers, academics, experts who've nothing to gain from gilding the lily or indeed from bringing personal bias. But they're clear. We have some of the highest levels of public investment in housing in Europe, but our outcomes are among the very worst. In other words, your government's housing policy has failed, and the report confirms what some of us have been saying all along. Developer-led planning does not deliver the homes we need. Weak tenants' rights protections hurt renters and do not free up supply, and low building targets, insufficiently ambitious targets, are damaging the well-being of our population. It appears, Taoiseach, that the report has been with the Minister for Housing for a number of weeks now. And this begs the question, was publication delayed because of the elections next month? Was the report going to gather dust on Custom House Quay until after 7th June because your government was afraid of what it says? Were you deliberately delaying publication? And indeed, I'm thinking back to when the temporary ban on no-fault evictions was lifted, and we saw RTB figures, statistics on evictions in the fourth quarter of 2022, delayed until after the lifting of the ban, delayed some time, some weeks after the original planned date for publication, as I found out then by way of FOI. And it looked to us very much then as if political pressure had been applied to the RTB to delay publication. And we asked the question again, was publication of this Housing Commission report, this important report, this damning indictment of government failure, was this publication also to be delayed until after 7th June, until after elections? So Taoiseach, I'm asking now, I welcome the commitment it will be published this week. Will you undertake to enable, facilitate a Dáil debate when we have it published? And when are you going to start taking the necessary emergency action that the Commission has recommended?
Thank you. Taoiseach.
So firstly, I think, again, it's important to be fair, as you generally are, that the Minister for Housing, I believe, received this report on the 8th of May. It's 13 days ago. So let's not say people have been sitting on reports for weeks. That's not fair. It's the 8th of May, which I think is 13 days ago. Now, you know, your party's been in government. I think to get a report with over 400 pages, 83 recommendations, over 500 actions and sub-actions, generally you'd like to consider those things, work with your team, develop responses. I don't think 13 days is a long period of time to elapse. It's what a responsible minister would do, and we will publish the report this week. And I think it's important we publish the report because, again, and I say this with respect to you, you are saying, will the government implement this recommendation, that recommendation? And with the greatest of respect to you and this House, people haven't seen the recommendations. And you mightn't even agree with them all yourself. How do you know yet? So before you call on us to actually implement the recommendations, I think it's important to see them, because we can set up housing commissions. This is the Parliament of Ireland. This is where the people's representatives make decisions, and the government makes decisions as well. So I do think it makes sense to publish the report, to publish it in full, to publish all the actions, and then see. But what you will also see is a number of actions and recommendations that the government has already acted on. I've read this morning and heard this morning on the radio references to planning reform. This is the biggest planning reform possible going on in this House right now, with the planning bill, which we want to see passed before this place breaks for the summer recess. So there's an awful lot of work gone on. I think it's important to see the report in the light of day and compare and contrast where we're at with a range of different recommendations, and indeed see if there's consensus or divergence of views around some recommendations as well. Be very clear, it's absolutely my position, absolutely the position of the three parties in government, and I presume the position of all parties in this House, that housing targets and housing output will need to increase. Very clear in relation to that. Don't need any commission to tell me that, don't need any report to tell me that, don't need any member of the opposition to tell me that. It is the position of the government that housing targets will increase, and that work is well underway. It's underway with two inputs, the 2022 census and with independent peer-reviewed research from the ESRI. There is a timeline in relation to that. We will see the draft National Planning Framework published next month. That will go out to consultation with the finalised version published later this year, and that will set revised targets for the second half of this decade. And I've already publicly on record saying that I believe the scale of new housing we need to build between 2025 and 2030 is in the region of around 250,000 homes, which averages at around 50,000. I believe the Housing Commission, based on a leaked report, says around 56,000. So there's a landing zone there that I think recognises the need to catch up for what was a lost decade of investment. It's not self-congratulatory, though, to say progress has been made. When your party joined my party in government in 2011, the height of the financial crash, there were less than 7,000 homes built in Ireland that year. We now have a situation where almost 33,000 homes were built in Ireland last year, because we have made progress in rebuilding a sector that was absolutely decimated, and now we need to lift the scale of that ambition to give people the hope, to get people out of the box room, and to make sure that all our housing supply numbers, our home ownership numbers, the number of people drawing down their mortgage all starts to increase and go in the right direction.
Deputy Badger.
Thank you for acknowledging the need to increase housing targets, and indeed your predecessor also accepted building targets were too low, but we're still waiting for those revised targets, those increased targets that are so badly needed. More than a year ago, we in Labour said that we would need to see output of 50,000 new builds per year to meet the real scale of need. And that's now endorsed and indeed confirmed, it appears, by the Housing Commission. And you've effectively confirmed it yourself. But we still don't have a timeline from you as to when those revised targets will be published, nor indeed as to when the recommendations, and I accept none of us on this side have seen the full report yet, but we need to know a timeline for when your government is proposing to put them into effect, because we need to hear that there is a sense of urgency in taking the emergency action that the Commission has said is necessary to meet and address the scale of the housing disaster. And in fairness, we didn't know when the Minister for Housing had received the report. You've now said it was the 8th of May, I think, 13 days ago. We don't know when he might have received a previous draft. But it would be very helpful, I think, to hear from you now more clarity as to when you propose to implement the recommendations in the report and to take that emergency action that's so necessary. Over 4,000 children in homelessness. That's one key group of the population, one key group of society who cannot wait any longer, who need to see more urgency from government.
Thanks to Deputy Batchick. So, firstly, we're not waiting for any targets. We have a target for this year. It was always very clear what the target was going to be for this year. I believe we'll exceed the target for this year, and I accept that the targets need to significantly increase. There is a political consensus in relation to that. There is a body of work underway for quite a period of time, and for clarity, the revised targets will be published this year. I mean, that is the position. I hope that the draft National Planning Framework, which I believe is due to be published in next month, will provide an opportunity during the summer months for consultation and engagement, with revised targets then published later this month. The crucial question, though, for every party in this House, and you've brought forward proposals and we bring forward proposals, is the word how. How? How are you going to increase the supply? What are we going to do to get to where we need to get to? Because it sounds to me like we have a similar landing zone. I believe we need to build 250,000 more homes between 2025 and 2030. I read comments from the Housing Commission today that seem to be not that different. I read comments in people's local election manifestos of different parties that seem to not be that different. It's not good enough for us just to say that, though. We have to show how we're going to get there, how we're going to provide the number of apprentices, how we're going to increase the trades, how we're going to have a planning system that works, what the composition of that is going to be between social, affordable and private homes as well. Because you talk about developer-led planning. What developer-led planning means is people building homes for people to be able to buy, and there's a hell of a lot of people in this country that still want their son or daughter to be able to buy a home. Social homes matter, affordable homes matter, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with the builder building private homes as well, and we do need that mix and that composition.